We're going to talk about apologetics, and I want to look at this passage, and I also want to look at the passage from which we get the very word apologetic, but I want to look at this passage because I want to examine some of the main reasons that we not only don't engage in apologetics, that's one thing to not engage in apologetics, but it's not that, right? It's not like not engaging in evangelism, although I'm going to argue that apologetics is part of our evangelism strategy. But most people, when you talk about why they don't engage in evangelism, most people are afraid. They don't feel like, they don't do well with people. They don't do well with rejection. They, don't want to sound like a freak or a weirdo or whatever, right? There's the barrier for evangelism. With apologetics, there are some people, right, who feel like I'm not going to engage in apologetics because I don't know everything, and we'll deal with that too, mainly when we get to the Peter passage. But that's not why most people don't engage in apologetics today, especially younger people. For younger people, they don't engage in apologetics because it's politically incorrect. It's not appropriate, right? In the age of tolerance and inclusivism, the only thing that we don't tolerate is intolerance, and apologetics seems intolerant. So young people, they don't do that. I'm not a social media fan. I have social media and I use social media, but I use social media as a petri dish. You'll never find me sitting around reading my feed. I don't think I've ever done that, right? That's not what I use it for. I use it for a couple of things. One of them is a petri dish. I just put stuff out there to see how people respond. And I go, yep, that's the deal. And one of the things that I've experienced, especially recently, especially in the last, 5-6 years or so, is I'll put a lot of issues up, cultural issues, moral issues up there. A lot of people get mad because they're like, you have all these followers and you can be putting Bible verses and you can be like, yeah, there's pages for that, right? This is the page where you come if you want to know what's going on from a cultural apologetic perspective, how we can be aware of it and how we can engage with it. And if you want to see some people engage with it, here. That's why you're here. You want a page that's going to give you a Bible verse every day, I'll tell you 10 of them, right? But one of the things that I've noticed in the last 5 or 6 years, especially with young people, you address a moral issue, especially, same-sex marriage, transgender, homosexuality, and young people, the 18 to 35-year-old category, they pounce. They pounce because it's just so mean, and that's why they don't like us, because we're so intolerant. And we wouldn't have all these issues if we just weren't so intolerant. And yada, 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 yada. And when this happens, not always, but oftentimes when this happens, I'll push back. And I'll just say something like, don't you find it interesting that I raised an issue that the Bible says offends God? And you're more offended by me raising the issue than you are by the sin that offends God. And usually there's radio silence, right? But sometimes they'll try to push back at that for a while. But they are more offended. Something that the Bible says is an abomination, right, before God. They are more offended that I have the audacity to call people out than they are with this thing that brought God's wrath on Sodom and Gomorrah, right? As one songwriter puts it, today the only heresy is saying that there's heresy, right? Today the only heresy is that's Shylin and his song, False Teacher. Apologetic. I'm not even a rap fan. But dude's calling people out in his song, False Teachers, right? And that line, that phrase in the song, today the only heresy is saying that there's heresy. The only thing that gets the 18 to 25-year-old crowd ready to gird up their loins and go to war as Christians for the sake of righteousness is people who actually point out error. Because that's what's wrong. Because today, listen, there's an 11th commandment. And the 11th commandment is, thou shalt be nice. We don't believe the other 10. You press the other 10, you're a legalist, right? Especially if you press the other 10 in an authoritative manner. And by the way, the more I look at it, again, this is the petri dish, right? It's not even part of my message. This is extra right here, okay? But as you look out in the culture, in the petri dish, and it's not even, and I'm not saying that I'm posting, and I'm calling people names, and I'm, no, that's not what's happening. But as I've examined over the last 5 or 6 years, what I've noticed is the thing that people find offensive is not being nice. That's what they say. But what they actually find offensive is being manly. You plant your feet, square your shoulders, lift your chin up, and say something without equivocation in a manly and forceful way, that in and of itself is not nice. By the way, that's preaching. That's preaching, which is why today you've got these mealy mouth, skinny jeans, mama's haircut, where that's why today you've got entertainers instead of preachers, right? Today you've got guys who are doing pop psychology from the pulpit, okay? Guy preaches a sermon. Imagine if, imagine this, especially on the hot button issues of the day where people are going to pounce on you for not being nice. Imagine this. I'm starting a sermon and I'm like, listen, today's sermon is on wife beating. And before I start the sermon, listen to me carefully. I love wife beaters. I have friends who beat their wives, okay? So don't hear me today bashing wife beaters just because I'm preaching from the now, you hear that and you go, huh? That's how every sermon on homosexuality, well, not everyone, because I got some on the internet too, but that's how a large percentage of sermons on homosexuality start. With a 15-minute apology and disclaimer for everything that's about to come after. And then you close by reiterating the disclaimer at the beginning. Why? Because the 11th commandment, thou shalt be nice, which, when you exegete the culture, means thou shalt not be manly. Now, in walks apologetics. In this context, right? In this context. And so you've got people out there who are like, yeah, that's, no, not cool, right? In fact, it's not Christian. It's not Christian.